In this episode of Viral Rewind, we're looking at the Billiards DOS virus. Now, this is an interesting virus in that it's a memory resident infector of .exe files, but it also includes a little bit of encryption and stealth capabilities. Plus, it hooks interrupts 1, 2, and 9. So 9 being the keyboard, 1 is for tracing, then 2 is for another function. So it makes use of interrupts to help spread its infection around. And then on a certain date it will have a graphical payload we'll see a little bit later. So we have our temp DOS directory that has a copy of our DOS programs, both .coms and EXEs, including the Billiards virus. So let's go ahead and load it into memory. And it prints out incorrect DOS version now. That's probably because the program that's infected with Billiards here is not meant for this version of DOS. It may require a newer version, may even require an older version. This is IBM DOS 4, so there's multiple versions of DOS, and programs are written for different versions of DOS. So if it's not compatible with that version of DOS that your system is running, it'll print out incorrect DOS version. So anyway, Billiards is now loaded into memory, so it's going to do an interesting method of infections using those, again, interrupts that I mentioned, because while it can be a direct infector, it makes use of command line functions to spread its infection around, namely the operation of the directory command, or dir. So anytime directory dir is issued, or you perform other commands on the command line, Billiards takes advantage of that and infects .exe files in the present directory that you're in. So if I keep running directory a few times, it will have spread some executables. Now, there is some things if it tries to infect all executables at once, or if it does it every time you run the directory command. And I'm going to insert a write protected floppy in here just to demonstrate that it is in fact trying to infect. And you notice with that write protected floppy, when I issued the directory command, that the drive had jittered on there. See, that's Billiards trying to infect the executables on the write protected floppy disk, but of course, because it's write protected, the drive doesn't allow any data to be written to it, so the drive head ends up just jittering. And we can run our executables like normal. But of course, as you see, even when we're running normal command line stuff, Billiards is still trying to spread its infection around to any executables when we run a command. So, go back to our other directory and take this disk out. So, again, we're running directory command. We can still run our other programs like attrib or append, or xcopy, or mem, or even some .com files like format or sys, or let's see what else we got here. Let's run check disk. Let me see if it does anything. Interesting if that gives up any kind of allocation errors or anything of sorts. No, it doesn't. Now, I also mentioned earlier that there's some encryption and stealth capabilities that Billiards uses, because when you first run Billiards or an infected file with it, that when it's not memory resident, it first decrypts itself to load it into memory. And then the stealth capabilities come about because of the fact that the file size changes to the executables aren't noticeable by the user. So there's that. So we pretty much demonstrated how the whole infection of Billiards works. We're now going to look at the payload, and the payload is specific to a date. And the date for it is the 31st of any month. So if there's a month that has a 31 day in it, you'll be able to see the payload. Otherwise, it will just run the programs as normal, but will still spread its infection. So we know that August is 31st. Let's switch back to that. And then I'm going to try running some executables in the folder there. If we're lucky, the very first one I try might initiate the payload. Maybe the second or third one will. So let's go in alphabetical order and try append first. Okay, append does not have infection. Let's try attrib. Attrib doesn't have it. Alright, let's just try running the billiards program itself. There we go. So this is the payload you get from billiards. As you can see from the screen here, it's knocking away letters and changing colors, making the letters that are flying away flash there. And you can also hear the ticking sound coming off the computer's internal speaker here every time a letter gets hit, I should say. Now the billiards payload does tend to clear most of the letters out on the screen. It doesn't completely clear it, but it does clear most of it. And again, the more characters that are on the screen at the time that the payload is initiated, the longer the payload lasts. And you might have noticed too, when we were trying to run billiards there directly, we were not getting that incorrect DOS version message. A program that's infected with billiards that's trying to activate on that actual payload date of the 31st will actually not function correctly. It will just go straight to the payload. It will not try to execute the program. Again, that's why we didn't get that incorrect DOS version prompt when we tried to run billiards. And it ended the payload there. And again, didn't completely clear the screen, but the payload can happen more than once in one instance. So if the computer is booted and billiard has already activated its payload one time, well, it will just repeat again and again. There's no limit on how many times the payload can activate. So let's try to bring up a little more text on the screen this time. Of course, clear screen does not work with this prompt very well, but that did it anyway. So let's just rerun billiards again. And this pretty much covers it for the billiards DOS virus, so I'll just leave it here with this payload with all the text.